Yeah, we do. And then guess what? This morning it changed. And we're gonna put this form in circle, because everybody's gonna be in circle. The 60 people who aren't will be in circle by this afternoon, I'm sure. This is where you're going to see all the free classes. So make sure you get on circle.
Critical devotion.
Yeah. All right, Bruce, all yours. You have fun. Have some fun.
Am I gonna be able to scroll or are you gonna?
Oh, through the forms. Oh, all right. I just put it as a QR code for the.
Oh, yeah. Please copy that QR code.
Oh.
That will give you access to all the stuff I'm gonna talk about.
And we'll be able to send that to the people on Zoom, right?
Yeah.
Awesome.
It's like 60 something pages. And will we get the QR code back there?
61.
Yeah. So it's a little much to be copied, especially when it wasn't redone until earlier this morning.
Sorry.
You put it in the bottom corner for you, so it'll.
Thank you.
No.
No. It worked for me.
Sorry, one day you'll get the. You got it.
Sorry, guys, I don't do technology.
Thank you.
Okay, it's taking me to a YouTube channel. Okay, channel loser. Wait a minute.
I don't know, it's not working. Did anybody get it?
Yeah, I know.
Let me just get closer, it must be my neighbor. You fucking serious?
Yeah.
Okay, got it.
Hey, it keeps getting out.
It's the same thing that's on this, guys.
No, it should not be.
Oh, it's not?
It should be 60 something pages.
61.
61. You got it?
Okay.
Okay, I got it.
All right.
I did.
Hold on.
You ready, guys?
This one is kind of.
Well, that's a separate one.
Send it
Right.
to your own work phone.
The QR code on the flyer that's out on the desk, that's different. That's for additional training.
Okay.
And we get the QR code.
All right, let's get started. So to give you guys a little background before I start this thing. C.A.R., as you probably know, they came out and released a bunch of the new forms as part of the June release, and that occurred in say June 25th, 26th, something like that. They did not include forms related to the NAR settlement. And that was because at the last minute, the Department of Justice came in and said to C.A.R., we'd like a little time to review your new documents to make sure they don't have any concerns that we have about how you guys do business. And so they postponed release of a bunch of these documents. And they have finally completed their review, completed some practice changes that they're going to try to enforce. And they have announced that they will release those forms into zip forms for use by everybody on July 24th. So when you come in on July 24th and you have to get a purchase contract or a buyer representation agreement, all those forms will be the very new ones dated July 2024. Now, I don't want to bury the lead here, so I'm just gonna come out and say this right away. I have a concern that what I'm going to tell you is going to distract you from hearing everything else. So I'm just going to get this out up front, and we're going to have a discussion real quickly on it, and then we'll move on through the rest of these things. At about 11:20 yesterday morning, in a meeting with C.A.R. and the legal department, C.A.R., they made an announcement that is going to change a lot of how many brokerages do it. And I'm gonna throw it out to Stephen first, and I'm gonna say, I'm gonna ask a question. What are the various ways that you as a buyer's agent can be paid? Can you name them?
The various ways,
Yeah.
through my office or through my, well, it has to be done through my broker, basically.
Oh, sorry.
Anybody else? Emma?
Through your buyer. Through seller concessions. Through the listing agent's partner.
That's it.
Yay.
Okay.
And wait,
That-
and isn't it to the buyer as well?
What she
There's
said.
a buyer.
She said-
Sorry.
So we have all been in this world, even with the proposed NAR settlements, where you can be paid from the listing agent, from your buyer, and through seller concessions. If you want to be paid your fees. Yesterday, at a little after 11 in the morning, C.A.R. announced that in terms of broker to broker compensation, meaning listing agent paying compensation to the buyer's agent. They are no longer going to support that in any way, shape, or form, or in any of their documentation.
Can you say it one more time? I'm sorry.
In terms of broker to broker compensation, listing agent to buyer's agent, they will no longer support that concept.
So we can't negotiate that on.
Let me, don't get ahead of me, girl.
I was never damn.
What they have said is, and they literally did say this. We made a decision, we believe we are looking forward to the direction that the real estate industry is going, and we're always ahead of the curve here at C.A.R. So we made a decision to remove broker to broker compensation. We will no longer support it. Now, I'm gonna tell you a couple of things. As of today, broker to broker compensation is not a violation of any laws. As of today, broker to broker compensation is not a violation in any sort of the proposed NAR settlement. As of today, until the 24th, we still have access to the CBC form, the Cooperating Broker Commission form, right? On the 24th, they will remove the CBC from zip forms. And the new versions of the listing agreement, the RPA, any other forms have removed all references to the CBC. That, and the reason I'm telling you all this up front before I get into everything else is I want to tell you, I think, you know, I'm going to do a little more research just to make sure there's no legal issues involved in this. But I think what we will be providing to you is our own version of a CBC form that you can still use when you submit an offer. If in fact the listing agent is willing to compensate on that, then you will be able to use this form to get it memorialized into a legal format that will enable escrow to process that. That may change depending on, if the DOJ comes in and says, no, this is a problem for whatever reason. I don't see a legal reason at this point that they could argue, but they're the DOJ and they're the 500-pound gorilla on blocks. So we'll see what happens, but at least for the time being, as fast as we can produce this form, what we will do is we will put it up on the Circle app and make it available to you to download. You won't be able to get it from zip forms because, as I said, they're washing their hands of this. Through C.A.R. Couple other potential issues. If you were to have a dispute with the listing agent, or if you're offering and the buyer's agent, you have a dispute, C.A.R. Legal will not address this in any kind of a consultation because they've washed their hands of it. But we'll still include mediation and arbitration clauses in it, which will be enforceable. And you still will be considered a third-party beneficiary, which nothing more than legal gobbledygook. It means you have a right to sue for it if you need to. But I wanted to get that out in front, so you're not thinking about that the entire time I'm talking about everything else. Right, yes,
Wouldn't the seller have to acknowledge this, the existence of this form that you're creating?
the seller will have to be informed that there is compensation.
I would inform them in writing and get acknowledged.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
But we're talking about just the relationship, the contractual relationship between one brokerage and another.
Thanks.
How will you communicate to the buyer's agent as a listing agent that that is available?
You're stealing my thunder.
Oh, sorry.
All right,
We have 87 questions. Who's that?
well, unfortunately, I don't have 87 minutes. All right,
So really, quick, we just passed around a flyer that has Bruce's pretty face on it, and that links to this form.
that would be handsome.
You know, you're great.
Pretty handsome.
All right, so, as I said, I've been working on this thing for several days and, as of the new versions of many of these forms, the new draft versions were not released until exactly 8 a.m. this morning. So I had to retool a lot of this stuff. Quick timeline as to kind of what we're looking at so far. June 25th, they did release 48 new forms. So those of you guys have been doing transactions since then, you've been using those new forms. 2 of those forms actually do deal with this NAR settlement, and they're important for you to be aware of. I did put something in the Circle app on this. I don't know if you've seen it or followed up on it, but there were 2 forms. One is called a DM-BR, and that is a form that must be used if you have a current BRBC, buyer representation agreement with a buyer that you are using right now. Because if you're using one at any time prior to July 24th, it would be the old version. And this DMBR is your disclosure to your buyer that things have been changed according to this NAR settlement. You must get their signatures. If you have a listing that is done, it will be, if it's done now, it is done on the old listing agreement form. So any listing agreement that you have done that does not say July 2024 on it, that's the old one. You need to do this form. It's called a DM-LA. They're both in the zip form library. That is your disclosure to your client, the seller, that things are changing. And it talks about no longer being able to have commissions referenced in the MLS, all that other good stuff.
What's the phone again, Bruce, please?
For listings, it's the DM-LA.
Thank you.
For buyers, it's the DMBR.
It's right there on the 625.
There you go. The remaining forms for the NAR settlement, as I said, they were released this morning. You can actually get a link if you log on to your C.A.R. account. There is a link that they have provided where you can see draft versions of these forms. Many of them are included here. The important ones for this are included here. July 24th, new form versions related to like the buyer representation agreement, any other stuff, listing agreement, purchase contract, all that stuff is going to be released into the zip form accounts. As of August 12th, at least that's the date that I'm getting so far, offers of compensation field will be removed from MetroList MLS, which means even though that is not August 17th, the date that everybody is saying this stuff is going to be implemented, effective on the 12th, if you are dealing with a listing and veterans, it will not have references to commissions. Now, that being said, I called MetroList compliance and had a nice chat with them this morning because even though MetroList came out with some proposed revised rules that they have now posted, it wasn't clear on one thing. And this will be important for you to do your listing. The NAR settlement prohibits you referencing commission or seller is agreeable to pay commission or anything like that in your confidential remarks. But you could put something and call it seller concessions. You can say in your confidential remarks, seller concessions being offered, quote unquote. Don't reference commission, don't reference payment to buyer's agent. Don't put anything like that. You can say seller concessions being offered. You can say something like seller will consider buyer concessions. And the take I get on this is that's gonna be our code language. And it's gonna be code to pick up the phone and have a heart-to-heart discussion with the listing agent. For those of you who list a lot of properties, it's gonna be in your best interest to have these conversations. I know when I was doing the high volume of business, I rarely answered the phone myself. I had staff doing it. And some of you on the larger teams, that may be the same thing today. But you're gonna wanna have somebody that is versed on, on that particular listing, the discussion you've had with your seller. And if you're listing property, you're gonna wanna be able to talk to the buyer's agents, because there's gonna be, you're gonna wanna have a verbal give and take before they write up that offer. And part of that discussion might be, yes, seller is willing to, contribute depending on the offer. So, come forward with your best foot, your best foot. Feel free to make an offer, if need be, we can counter it. And they might also ask you as a listing agent, are you willing to contribute anything? If the seller's not, are you willing to contribute anything towards payment, the buyer brokerage fee? It's a nice way of getting everything lined up before you write up your offer.
So just don't use the word commission.
No, when you're talking on the phone, there's no prohibition on that.
Right.
Okay, it's the rule that applies to MetroList, and what we do is that in MetroList, you cannot reference the word commission. You want to talk in code, buyer concessions, which could mean, payment of, recurring and non-recurring buyer closing costs. It could also mean payment of the buyer representation fee. Yes, Doc.
If, so when I have a listing, I generally make a website for each property. Could I put in there that I'm doing a broker?
Is it your own, it's your own website? It does not go through the office, does not go through MetroList?
Correct.
If it does not go through MetroList, if it's not an IDX type fee, then yes, you can do that.
So then I could put in the remarks, see details about seller concessions on website app. And then it would be,
Absolutely.
okay.
Actually, that was one of the things that she mentioned to me this morning.
Chris, I know Jason Abrams said something that we possibly could do it on ours if we make a separate.
If it's separate from the brokerage website that connects via IDX to all of the listings, then yes. If it were a standalone, but if it in any way connects through IDX to MetroList listing, then no.
Thank you.
So we're.
I have a question on that.
Yeah.
Can it be on Disclosure.io, like the home light where we usually post disclosures? Can we do an attachment that explains that there?
That connects to MLS.
That does not connect, that does
It
it?
does connect.
It does.
Yeah,
If
no.
you put the link on there and copy the link's
Yeah,
on
Yeah,
MLS.
that's connected,
no-
it's connected to
and that
MetroList.
comes too close.
Got it. So we would have to, but we can provide a link to another website, is what you're saying?
Yeah, if it's a website you control that's not connected via IDX or anything like that, absolutely.
Okay.
Okay.
Oh, wait, that doesn't make sense though, because.
Yeah, because Homelight isn't affiliated with MLS, so.
As long as the prohibition is any site that is connected with the MLS services or through IDX or anything like that, then no, you cannot reference commissions.
You can reference concessions, but not commissions.
Yes, you can reference concessions.
Is that just for the feed to pull, like listen to search MLS, or does that include any time where MLS information all populates on the website?
Well. Yeah. Sherry, you had something.
I think it's one thing we have to get used to. This isn't the office's advice. I'm not posting it anywhere. There's a reason why these people's hands are tied. And so unless you want to have an attorney review that and look at your risk and your liability, my face is turning red because this is just, it's not fair, it's not right. But the Department of Justice is going hard at this. So the next, once he gets through, the California Association of Realtors makes this huge change, right? It's not a little deal, it's a big deal. Our MLS does this change. I would not on my own want to have that liability. I would just suggest don't put it, get used to the calls. That's what I would say.
Yeah,
Let's
it's
just
not
get
that hard.
used to the calls and
Oh,
not do it.
yes.
Limit
Hard.
your liability is what I'm saying. I want to piggyback on that. I have a question. So I have this verbal conversation, I have a listing currently. I have this verbal conversation with the buyer's agent. We agree that yes, there's seller concession for a certain amount of monies, right? We're not calling a commission any longer. Do I?
You're on the phone. you can
Yeah, but
call
here's
it.
the thing, I would want to make sure that I also put that in writing, and when I put it in writing, I can't say commission.
When you.
Yeah.
So.
With an email from-
When
I
you,
want to confirm with an email, because I can see coming down the road, verbal, which you said, and he said, and they said,
Confirm with an email.
you tell me all the time, get it in writing,
I get off the phone with you.
Yeah.
You're the listing agent.
yes,
And you tell me, oh yeah, I'm willing to contribute X percentage. Of the closed purchase price towards your buyer, your buyer representation. The amount that your buyer owes you on the buyer representation.
Okay.
And I say, great, so I write up an offer. I include whatever version of this CBC form that we're going to have available. With that offer, I include that over. Everything gets signed. It's all agreed to, it's memorialized in writing. And that is fine to talk about a percentage of the sales price.
okay,
There's no problem with that.
okay,
We still all have to follow antitrust rules. We can't have discussions about commissions, what we normally charge or anything like that. Commissions are 100% negotiable. You have to stick to that mantra when you're dealing with your buyers or sellers. None of that has changed. The only thing that has changed here, well, two things. One, C.A.R. no longer supports broker-to-broker compensation, but we can get around that ourselves. And two, you cannot display a commission amount or references to commissions within the multiple listing service.
okay.
Outside of that, for a system connected to the multiple listing service, it's, we're free to say the word commission. There's no
Okay.
problem.
I just want to be clear.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
In the listing agreement, can the seller still agree to that compensation, that concession in the listing agreement between the seller?
It's actually been removed from the listing.
So what if you want the seller to agree to it in writing when you're taking a listing?
It's a discussion that the seller, the listing agreement is designed for the seller to pay the listing agent. And there's some variables to how that will work, and I'll show you that in a few minutes. But if you have a discussion with your seller, basically what you want to say is, look, we may get an offer and the buyer may be asking you to pay their buyer brokerage fee. It'll come with the offer in the form of a form that we're using called an SLPP, which you'll get a copy of and you'll see that. That form becomes part of the purchase contract. It's like actually a part of the contract, fully enforceable. If the seller agrees to it, the seller's obligating themselves to pay that fee.
That's a time of receipt of a offer.
Up until that, everything's verbal and subject to getting something in writing anyway.
So they could say up front, okay, we're willing to pay that, and then when it gets up to the point, then they can say, all right, we're not, we no longer want to do that. You pay him out of what I negotiate with
Well,
you.
you're not obligated as a listing agent to pay that though.
Yeah,
let's say you, so let's say these days in the cooperating world, you have a state, you have a commission that you negotiated that's X%. Okay, I know I'm not allowed to say what I do. So, now are you still gonna get the listing for that same X%? Discuss this with your seller and then
Let's
verbally.
let's hold this until we get the listing. All right, we need to move on. All right. So we've already discussed some of the key provisions, no offers of compensation, can be displayed in the MLS. I gave you some options you can use in your confidential remarks. Big thing, this is also part of the settlement. Effective, with the implementation of the settlement, which right now is supposed to be August 17th, may have to be done sooner depending on other things that happen with the MLS. You must have a buyer representation. Whether you're using the old form until the new one comes out on July 24th, or whether you use the new one from then on, if you do not have a buyer representation agreement, you have no way of getting paid. So, get used to selling your value as a buyer's agent.
And just reiterate that, yes, we are going to have another class regarding this, because a lot of people are texting me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
We are, this isn't one and done.
and it will be available on the YouTube channel.
And Bruce, I did notice the last couple of days that I'm showing some homes. A lot of agents are actually offering 2.50s and 3%.
Yeah, we don't talk about commissions.
I know, so no,
We don't talk about commissions.
I didn't say commission. I just say they're offering
Yes, they are offering
2.50
compensation.
and 3%, which
Moving on. You gotta have a buyer representation. Also, within the buyer representation agreement, it cannot be for a term greater than 3 months. Okay? No, don't say 90 days. Right now, it's 3 months. There has been some dispute. So there's been some dispute on, there are some forms that are referencing 3 months. There are other forms referencing 90 days. There is actually a difference. And that needs to be clarified. It may have already been clarified by C.A.R. I haven't checked the documents yet because they just came out this year. But, whatever it says, I'm assuming it's probably gonna be 3 months. But if your agreement runs 1 day over 3 months, it is null and void. You can extend that agreement, but the total period from where you're at to the end of the extension cannot run over 3 months. All right,
Can you just do a modification of terms or do you have to redo the whole agreement?
there is a modification of terms specific to buyer representation agreements. That's another change. There used to be one form called a modification of terms. There's now a modification of terms form for buyers. There's a modification of terms form for sellers. And you'll find those will give you a lot more flexibility as to what you can do with it.
So an existing buyer agreement that is more than 90 days, now that I have signed, I'll have to do this modification terms before August 17th.
Yeah, I would just get it done. As soon as the 24th comes out, just do it once and done with the new form. All right, open house visitors.
Bruce, is there a limit of time with those extensions or modifications?
In no case can any existing term go more than 3 months.
Every 3 months?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and if you wait until, if you renew it 5 days before your 3 months, then the renewal better be 5 days less than 3 months.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it can be more than 3 months. It's gonna be a thing.
Open houses, there are, 2 new forms, that you can use for open houses. They are, we'll see these in a second, the OHNA-SI, it's called an open house visitor non-disclosure, non-agency disclosure and sign-in. That informs visitors that they are not in an agency relationship with a listing agent and therefore are not working, quote, working with the agent. There's no implied agency or anything like that. If the visitor already has another broker working on their behalf, then the listing agent would want to be informed of who the other agent is to avoid any conflicts and to allow the listing agent to follow up without violating code of ethics. There's a second form, brand new today. It's called a PSRA, and that is a property showing and representation agreement. And that is what you can use with a prospective buyer to show them up to 3 open houses. It acts as a buyer representation agreement. So there's those 2 available. In the event somebody shows up at an open house and you ask them to sign in on this non-agency agreement, and they say, I'm sorry, I don't do that. Or they have to flat out refuse. Then you can invite them in as a representative of the seller. You can give them a flyer with all details about the house, but you cannot answer any questions that they might have about the house because that could create an implied agency. Okay, so if they pursue and demand and whatever, you can say, you know, if you want to do this, then I need you to sign a document.
Do they get a copy of the document or we only keep hold of that document?
All right. All right, let's scroll down to the next page. Oh, actually, right here, scroll right to there. Upcoming town halls. There's a link there, but I think on that sheet of paper that we got the Bluetooth, which came out after this was finalized, later this morning. It probably has that same link. That's where you can get to the town halls that are gonna go through all this stuff as well. I highly encourage you, attend one or more of those town halls. C.A.R. is also going to be offering 2 buyer representation classes. They will be free with a coupon code. I have been told that towards the end of this week, early next week, they will be sending an email to all members. So check your spam folders because that email will have the code that makes these classes free.
And we're gonna add the link in circle.
And we're gonna put the link in circle.
They gotta charge us to get that 419 million somewhere.
Well, I have been told they're not charging us for these classes. If you've already taken the C.A.R. class on the buyer broker agreement, it's nice that you put the time into it, but like me, I wasted my time. You're
I
gonna,
did it already, yeah, we should,
miscellaneous important reminders. So let's scroll up a little bit here. No, that way.
Sorry. Sounds
You scroll it, thank you.
Right there. That's what I want. All right, this has nothing to do with the NAR settlement or anything like that, but I wanted to take an opportunity to mention it. 2 of the forms that were updated that have already been released are the TDS and the SPQ. There is a state law, it's right up there, it's called AB 2960, went into effect beginning of 2023. AB 2960 basically says that the disclosures that a seller has to use are the ones that were in effect when a contract is ratified. So if you already have a listing, it is not in escrow, it is not in escrow, then your sellers are going to need to redo, if they were required to do a TDS, SPQ, they're gonna have to redo them using the newest forms. Okay?
I just printed out those forms just a couple of days ago on Saturday.
Yeah.
Are they new since
Yeah,
Saturday?
the TDS and the SPQ, the ones in zip forms, they have been good.
Since when?
Yes.
For a while.
If it says June 24 on them, they're fine.
Okay.
All let's go to the next section. All right, so this is kind of just an overview first. When you're working with a buyer, and you may do it a different way, but I would suggest you have a buyer intake meeting. Find out what their needs and wants are, and then you're gonna start filling out forms. The forms you're gonna want to be taking a look at are gonna be the BRBC, the Buyer Representation and Compensation Agreement, the BCA, which is Broker Compensation Advisory, the BIPP, which is Buyer Identification of Preferences and Priorities. This is a really helpful form. And it can be useful to you after the fact, if in the event that you find a buyer a house, and let's just say it's not what they told you they wanted. You find them a house, they decide to buy it, and then they kind of pivot and say, well, you didn't find me exactly what I was looking for. Therefore, I'm not gonna pay you. If you go through this BIPP form, it identifies, all sorts of information about exactly what they're looking for, so they can never come back and say that, you didn't do your job. It's also helpful when, kind of trying to determine what searches to set them up on and what to look for. The BFPI, Buyer Financial and Personal Info Form, also very helpful. Because it identifies other things, talks about if they've already got loan pre-approval, who it's with. Again, it kind of fine tunes some of the stuff they're looking for. Are they first-time home buyers? Are they investors? Are they licensed real estate salespeople? Because as you probably know, if they are and you write an offer, you need to disclose that your client is a licensee. That's required under state law. Anyway, great information there. There's also 2 boxes on that form, one of which says buyer is unable to pay buyer's agent's commission. If they check that box, then you need to make it clear to them that the only way I'm going to be able to get you under contract is if the seller or the listing agent is willing to pay my fee. And you have to be prepared to be able to walk away, either before or after they discover they can't get that fee paid, if that's what you choose to do.
So all those forms are required after August 17th for any buyer.
Yeah, I'm not going to require that you do the BFPI. But the BRBC, the BCA, and the BIPP, yeah, you're gonna wanna do those. The ABCD would have been a helpful form, except that yesterday they announced their own move.
What are the 3 did you say again that you're gonna require?
The BRBC, the BCA, and the BIPP. Now, be mindful too, the BRBC, for those of you who aren't brand spanking new and you've seen these contract packages before, they come with numerous other documents within them. Agency disclosures, consumer protection, fair housing, appraisal discrimination, on and on and on. So when you get these forms through your zip form subscription, like the BRBC, it's not just gonna be a BRBC, it's gonna be all these other things that come ahead of it. So just don't be surprised when you see that. All right, there's also a standalone form called a CA, it's compensation agreement. And it's only to be used when there's no other signed listing, buyer representation, or single party. I can't imagine you're going to be using it very often, but it is available. And then we've already discussed the DMBR and the DMLA. If you already have an existing listing or if you already have an existing buyer representation agreement. This one here is what I talked about. They removed the modification of terms form and they replaced it with a modification of terms for buyer representation. And then there's the COBR, which is used to cancel a buyer representation. All right. We can scroll down. The only form I want to focus on in detail is this buyer representation agreement. And you could go Okay, so right here, you can see here, it actually tells you cannot exceed 3 months. So, unless you're dealing with a corporation or LLC, it's actually void if you exceed 3 months.
We don't really define a month there, though, do they?
No, well, if it's 3 months, it goes from, July 10th, August, September, October 10th.
Okay.
10th or 9th,
If it's 90 days,
goes till the 9th of October, otherwise you're 3 months and 1 day.
right,
Oh.
what Scott said.
Smart Scott.
Yeah.
I'm calling you from now on.
There we go. Please. And then if you can go down a little further,
This 14 pages too. Sorry.
right there. Right, so here's section E is where you spell out your compensation. You notice one big change between this form and the one you're currently used to is they're formalizing all of these major forms in a grid format. And I personally think this makes it a lot easier to just get all facts out on the first page.
Right.
This form works just like the residential listing agreement, which you will see, new version, and the RPA, where the column on the very left is referencing this row. But if you have questions about this particular section, you go further down, find 4C, and it gives you a nice paragraph or more explaining what that means. So if you're ever in doubt, you can take a look at that and it'll take you right to there and kind of give you a little bit more in-depth definition.
Bruce, it looks like you put the continuation period right there, so 3 months plus another 3 months.
No, continuation period is something totally different.
Oh.
Continuation period, they changed terminology. We used to call that a protection period. So like on a listing agreement, if there's a paragraph that says, in the event that after the expiration of this listing agreement, somebody that has seen the property previously comes back and buys it, you still owe me a commission. That's what this is. They're saying there's a continuation period so that if this buyer at the expiration of this comes back for X number of months or days,
30
yeah,
days.
calendar
30
days,
days.
calendar days,
30.
then they owe you a commitment. They owe you a commitment. That's what that is.
If they saw that house with you
Yes.
originally.
If you were the
Yes.
procuring funds. Now, something I want to point out, cancellation rights and notice, actually, this goes farther up. When you type of representation. Type of representation defaults to non-exclusive. Meaning they can be working with you, they can be working with you, they can be working with you. And as long as you show them different properties, not the same one, then, all bets are off. My recommendation, that's the default. My recommendation is when you complete this, check exclusive. That will protect you a little bit better. You're not wasting all your time.
Bruce, the old format is geographical limit, right? You can say Sacramento County or something like that. Right?
Well, you can do
It
that.
still
here,
asks
too.
you that.
Yeah, but that's why you want to use that BIPT system. Okay,
Right, but if you're non-exclusive and you're Sacramento County, those would be conflicting forms.
well, you can spell it out. You can spell it out in there, but it's just non-exclusive for Sacramento. Scroll up, please. I think that's all I have time to go through on this. You can see all this red, that's the stuff they just recently added.
Added or changed?
Changed and added.
So it's a 90-page document.
It's not 90, it's 5 pages. Don't exaggerate, Scott. Right, still has mediation and arbitration in there.
Wow.
And stop. All right. Paragraph 16. This is the last page of it. Paragraph 16, you're going to put whatever compensation you referenced on the first page in here as well. The reason you're doing that here on the signature page is because all of this stuff now, all the buyer representation, it is fully disclosable to escrow and to the other side of the transaction. And This page, you are allowed to disclose. So when you're getting ready to close, this page, I think the escrow, company that's handling the sale, they're gonna wanna see this, because that way they can factor that into drawing up the closing documents. Right? Let's go up. BCA is just an advisory. It basically, tells how we can be compensated.
So you guys, we're gonna be doing this class twice a month. One's gonna be in the morning and then one's gonna be in the evening for the people who have to work, right? And we're still working out the dates, but we'll have something in writing by the end of the week. Cause clearly it's a lot.
Yeah.
And, you're gonna need it more than once, more than twice, more than 3 times. So this is when you're gonna invite your transaction coordinators. You're gonna invite all your assistants, and everybody should be in the know with all of this.
Yeah, and I will tell you, I've attended numerous classes.
Wait.
And I've gone through these documents. I've had draft documents, all the different versions. When I was home on my medical leave and working from home, I was going through these documents, trying to pinpoint, areas of concern and stuff. I still get confused. So I will be continuing to take these classes as well, other classes, so that I can bring information to you guys. What could go on? Let's go up. Buyer identification of preferences and priorities. This is more very important. So if you just kind of glance at some of the stuff that's in here as you scroll
I
out.
like this one.
You don't like
I
this?
mean,
I do, I like this form.
That's the only form we like.
yeah.
Take all the rest out.
Yeah, I like it.
So take advantage of that, please. This one here, like I said, I also like. I'm not gonna require it, but I highly suggest you use it. You can see look at all the different information it has. Financing information, financing type that they're gonna be going with. Do they currently rent or own, what their ownership experience is, first time buyer, whatever. Are they a real estate licensee? What their time constraints are. This form and the BIPP though, they both contain confidentiality provisions. You cannot disclose any of this stuff to the other side of the transaction. Amethyst.
On the BIPP on F, other, is that where we would put that we've had a discussion with our clients and they do not want to see any homes that are not offering X amount commission?
Hang on.
Or less than, or-
Which paragraph did you think?
on
Oh,
the
yeah,
BIPP on F, yeah, on other, is that where we would
Yeah.
take that?
That's exactly.
Okay, and I have one more question back up on the BRBC about the cancellation part of it. So if we mark exclusive, then cancellation effective 30 days after receipt. So what happens in those 30 days?
They're locked in.
So you have a thing with them for 3 months, but then what about that other, then that's a month after that?
Well, they're locked in with you as well, though. You have a duty to them, but they have a duty to you.
For 30 days or 3 months, I think that's what she's asking.
Oh.
Well, yeah, it says cancellation effective 30 days after receipt. So,
Let's take this one offline so I can get through.
Okay.
this.
okay.
All right, let's go up a little further, please.
We do have one announcement after this.
Okay. This form has been removed, so we don't need to discuss it. What? Okay, this is the
Oh.
generic compensation agreement that can be used. Okay, this is the form I was talking about. You have an existing buyer representation agreement that was revised 12/22 or earlier, which is the current version that's out there. That will be replaced on July 24th when they release the new ones.
But it's not 624.
That's wrong. This was an old draft. So anyway, I'm sorry, you're right, Alicia. This one has already been released. So if you have an existing buyer representation agreement, but the date on the buyer representation agreement is before the July version, you want to use this form. This is, this form here is talking about 6/22. This form came out June 20, not the BRBC. So this is what you would use to inform your buyer. And if you scroll up a little bit, this is, right there, I underlined it. Buyer and broker agree that once the MLS prohibits offers of compensation, any buyer representation agreement term allowing broker to retain any excess compensation offered by a third party shall be unenforceable. I didn't mention that previously. That is one of the terms that we're going to be bound to in this settlement and in the new paperwork. If, let's just say, for example, your buyer representation agreement says that you get 3 apples. The seller offers 4 apples. The most you are allowed to get are 3 of those red and delicious apples. Okay. Now, what you can do though, is you can do a modification of your buyer representation agreement to change that. When would you want to change it? Well, if your buyer is in agreement and they're willing to sign off on that, that would be fine. But you probably should also explain to the buyer that by taking that higher amount, it might affect the offer that they get accepted. Maybe their offer won't get accepted, or maybe, maybe the terms won't be as good because the seller is going to be putting out more money. So you have to keep in mind the duty you owe to the buyer as well. The other thing that the buyer might appreciate is if you, as the agent, if you wanted to credit your buyer with the excess, the way you would do that is you would do a modification to your BRBC along with an agreement to your buyer that says any amount over this, I'm going to credit to you at close of escrow, because you are allowed to rebate money over to your principal, whether you're on the listing side or the buyer side. Okay. All right, let's move it up. This is the one, that's the one for the listing agreement, same type form. You have a current listing agreement that is out before July 24th of this year. You're going to want to fill that form out, have your seller sign it. Go on out. NAR. This is the normal modification to a buyer representation agreement that you would use. You can change the expiration date. You can change compensation. Gives you nice big other section to write stuff in. Very flexible form. The one for listings is very similar. Let's scroll on up. Cancellation of buyer representation. This form outlines all the terms that you have to follow with cancellation. I don't need to go into all that here. Go ahead and scroll up. All right. Listing property. So, as I said, after you've identified some properties, you're probably going to want to pick up the phone, have a conversation with the listing agent. If you are listing agents, expect to get some phone calls or emails or whatever. All right. Have those conversations. Your seller's advantage, and definitely it's the buyer's advantage. Number of the ways you can be paid. Seller pays you through use of this SLPG form. The listing agent might agree to pay you, but that's a conversation you're going to have, so on and so forth. You want to pay attention to those two ideas. Go ahead and scroll up. All right, then you prepare your written offer. Forms you're going to want to fill out right now are going to be the RPA, And if the seller, through that discussion, has expressed interest in some sort of compensation, then you're gonna use that SPVB form and include that with your offer. If you, even though the SPVB references the RPA dated such and such date, make sure you include them in the same DocuSign package. So they are in the envelope together, right? And then we have the residential purchase contract. There's a couple changes in here I wanted to point out while I have your attention. Can you scroll up, please? A little more right there. All right. With this version of the form, you'll notice, if you haven't noticed it already, C.A.R. has added a new contingency. It is insurance. And it's not just the ability to obtain homeowners insurance, it's the ability, as it explains within 8D, it is the ability to obtain insurance at a cost that is acceptable to the buyer. All right? That, if any of you have been involved with buyers lately, you'll know that sometimes it's problematic getting cost-effective insurance. So that's a big one to pay attention to. Go ahead and scroll up. And by the way, if you haven't noticed, they put all the grids there. That's still there. That hasn't changed. Scroll up.
Just keep in mind, I mean, I've been doing this for 30 years, what about over 30, I'm not the exact, but you know, it's gone like this. It's the ups and downs. This has changed so much. The contract has changed so much since I started.
It used to be a few pages.
I know, and they were carbon copy if I can think you.
I thought it was just a bar napkin. I thought it was just a bar napkin, like a handshake.
Actually.
Yeah, there you go, on a napkin.
Actually,
Right?
there's a court case in California. That was a, yeah, Emmett said it used to be a bar napkin. There's actually a very famous case, went up to the state of California. Somebody tried to get out of a contract that they wrote on a bar napkin. And they claimed that the bar napkin did not satisfy the statute of frauds. And basically it had the parties to the contract, it had the property, it was dated, and they both signed it. And the court said that was a valid purchase contract.
So in other words, no one's allowed to text me and say, I tap out, I'm done. Because it's all about,
It's always changing.
right, you've got to roll with it, you've got to learn it, you've got to come to the classes over and over and over. You can get it if you want it bad enough, bottom line.
Scroll up, please. Up a little bit more.
It is, it's just cheap.
You will notice in this section, just a little tiny bit more, real estate broker section. The last draft version that we had a section in here in the numbered part, 1, 2, 3, 4, where they actually referred to the CBC form and how that was going to be included in the contract if there was a CBC. The C.A.R. has removed that in its entirety, so that's not going to be there anymore. Scroll up a little more. All right, up a little more. CBC is gone. You can scroll through that. Down a little bit. Whoa, back up. SPV. There. This is the seller payment to buyer's broker. This form is what you're going to include with your purchase contract when you believe there is an agreement with the seller to pay buyer broker commission. Now, I'm going to tell you this, may not agree with this. You, especially if you're primarily a listing agent, you may not agree with this. In my view, when you talk to that listing agent and they tell you, you ask them, is the seller willing to pay the buyer broker fee? That listing agent says no. But if your buyer needs that to happen, the buyer wants to make a try at that property, my advice is fill out this form, regardless of what the listing agent says. And, the issue is, it's he or she will have to present it to their client. And this form, as you can see, it is made a part of the purchase agreement. So, you know, it's gonna have to either be countered out or it's gonna have to be agreed to. And it will at least elicit a response from the seller. And if your offer is a good offer, maybe the net numbers that the seller is gonna look at will say, oh yeah, this, you know, we haven't done any other activity. Let's take this off and we'll pay the buyer broker. It is worth the shot. And so, you know, regardless of what the listing agent says,
So it says it there, that's part of the RPA. Does the RPA have a box to check to incorporate this?
no,
That might be a good idea.
I'm not the attorney at C.A.R.
I mean, you can probably fill it in on your own.
Anyway, this is a very helpful form. And, I'm not gonna go through all the verbiage, we just don't have the time right now. Listing related forms. We've got the residential listing agreement, which is completely redone with the whole grid format, like we saw before. The BCA, we already covered that. That goes with buyer sides also. There's a new form called the multiple listing service addendum. And yeah, I know. That is gonna be a required form for compliance. I hate to say. But this is being added in because they are removing some of the stuff about the MLS from the listing agreement. And they had to get it included in there somehow, so they made a whole new addendum for it. So there's that. Then we have the modification of terms for listing agreements, which we've already talked about. That replaces the form MT. And then we have the DM-LA, which is, again, is for if you already have a listing agreement under the old form, this is what you would have your seller fill out. So let's scroll up real quick. Stop here. You can see these nice little grids. Let's scroll up just a tiny bit more right there. You can see the listing period not to exceed 24 months. Okay, that was done because there were some crooked people out there that were approaching primarily senior citizens and saying, I'll give you $500 cash today for the privilege of being your listing agent over the next 40 years if you ever decide to sell.
Okay, so predatory.
And they were locking them in, and finally the state clamped down and said, no, we're putting an end to it. So maximum period is 24 months.
Wasn't that gonna be 12? They did change it.
It was
24.
They
Okay,
changed it.
okay. I'm like, am I crazy or, okay, that answer's still yes.
Most of that stuff is self-explanatory. The compensation section is section C. And you can see here on the listing, first one is always going to be filled out. Compensation to seller's broker, only the seller side of the transaction. You're going to fill that one out. You can have a percent, you can have a flat fee, you know, however you want to do it. Additional compensation to seller's broker if the buyer is unrepresented. Okay, so if it ends up becoming dual agency, you're covered by putting an amount in here. Continuation of right to compensation for broker identified prospective properties. This is, again, used to be called the protection period. Now it's the continuation period. And I recommend putting 6 months there.
If the buyers are unrepresented and you mark that, does that now mean you are representing them or you're just charging more because they are unrepresented and now you're gonna have to do all the paperwork for both sides? That doesn't mean the buyers,
It can be either.
it can be, okay.
Yeah, but if it could be either, but if you actually represent them, you are entitled to compensation. You also still, however, need to do higher representation.
You
In
recommend,
addition
you
to
recommend
filling
6
that out,
months, you recommend 6 months on C2,
Say that again.
which item you recommend?
I always recommend 6 months on a protection period or continuation period. I've never actually enforced it on anybody. I could have, but I never have. But I tell people it's 6 months.
Which is 4C,
Huh?
4C,
Wait,
I can't read.
C2 or 4C?
C2 additional, no.
C3.
C3.
Yeah.
You said you do what, 60?
I do not, I do 6
months.
months.
Oh, 6 months.
Yeah.
Bruce?
Yeah.
On C1, so should you put a number in there that anticipates the chance that you're gonna pay a buyer's broker?
Good question. Scott asked, on C1, should you put a number in there that anticipates you're going to pay a buyer broker? What I would tell you, Scott, is if you're on a listing presentation and, and you're having a discussion with your seller, you're talking about the numbers and how it could play out. If you want to tell your seller, this is what I charge, however, you know, I will commit to you that, you know, if, once we get an offer, I agree to pay the buyer's, you know, the buyer's side X%. I don't see a problem with that. I would say, if I were you though, I would not do that. I would just, because I think that's trying to get around the spirit of the NAR settlement. I would just fill it out like it says, and
So you would do the net amount that you would have normally got under the old way of doing
Yes.
it there, and then you would,
and then have.
but then say, but an agent may come in and want to be compensated, so anticipate you're gonna get this.
I would anticipate that I'm going to have this discussion with the seller that says, look, when we get an offer, you know, this is my fee, this is what I charge you to sell your house. But when we get an offer, it's very likely you're gonna be asked to pay, you know, some sort of a fee for the buyer's agents. So, you know, I would anticipate, you know, you'd be aware of that because the discussion's gonna come up.
It's actually kind of a benefit to your seller to not pre-negotiate it because somebody might come in and not ask for much to get their buyer the deal.
Right.
So it's like actually maybe a benefit to our seller to not negotiate that
And I just,
front, which I thought was opposite till today.
well, and I don't wanna see anybody getting into a position where they create a practice in their business. And it looks on the face like you're just doing this to get around their curve.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
That could be.
I have a question. So I'm doing a listing agreement and I'm gonna make sure that all of those are filled out. The additional compensation of seller's broker or buyer is unrepresented. I'm filling that out as well, percentage.
I would, yeah.
And then the continuation of right to compensation, that's 60 calendar days.
You said
You-
6
you-
months.
I
6 months?
do 6 months, you can do 30 days, you
Okay.
can do 60, whatever. That's a business choice of your own.
They
And,
don't ever get.
and this last
Yeah,
one,
seller's obligation.
there's a question on the old listing agreement. Are you, Mr. Seller, obligated to pay any previous brokerage a listing commission under any terms? And there might, you know, it might be that so-and-so had looked at their property when it was listed with another broker. And if that person comes back and says they want to buy it, this is where you would account for that. And that person would be, you know, either excluded or you'd have to have an agreement to compensate this other broker.
So you have to actually list the other broker's name. Company.
Yes, you list the broker's name here
And the
and
buyer's
a
names.
property and the
And-
potential buyer's name here,
Okay.
right? Scroll up, please.
I love your suggestion, Bruce, when you were talking about having that talk with the seller. Because like in the last 2 years, when we've been on a listing presentation, who hasn't talked to their seller about the potential of getting a buyer asking for a concession to buy down their rate?
Yeah.
That's right.
Exactly.
All the time. Kind of thing, and so that when the offer comes, my mom calls it her parents for the bump, right? So when it comes, they're used to that, they'll hold on when that bump comes and not fall out.
But if you're just having a discussion, none of it's in writing.
Right.
That would seem to me, the old form did everything perfect. This form is like, it's just waiting for another lawsuit.
But it's up to a buyer's agent to negotiate their own commission. Like, it's not my job to get you paid.
No, it's this, but
You
this
negotiate
form
it on your own.
is excluding the seller from that discussion, so this form is saying, look, this seller. Again, we're having this discussion, then the offer comes in and the seller says, wait a second,
But-
where in writing did I say I would pay?
But it's not a matter of there being obligated.
No.
What you're doing is you're setting the expectation with them.
But not in writing.
Oh, and they don't have to accept the offer.
But it doesn't come.
Then they're never gonna
exactly
accept
what
an
the
offer.
lawsuit wanted, which was to make the buyer's conditions
They're not.
negotiable.
Well, no, very good, about not disclosing to the seller that he's paying for it. Here we are not disclosing, not
I
disclosing.
understand. I understand what you're saying, but what you have to get over is there's no arguing where we're at.
I know.
This is our reality. It doesn't help to, to complain about it, to,
You gotta be able to roll.
yeah,
You have to.
exactly. You gotta be able to roll.
One year, these forms last 1 year,
Yeah.
that's how long?
Well, I think the majority of them we're gonna have for a long time. The issue with the BCA or the broker compensation, that may change. I don't know. It might change for the worse. It might change back to the way it is now, or currently. Oh, that's interesting. Oh, no, never mind. Oh, on the RPA, I didn't point this out. There are two sections in the grid. One is you can still ask for buyer concessions for recurring and non-recurring closing costs, loan buy downs, all that stuff. Separately is a box where you put in the RPA for the seller to pay the buyer's agent's commission. And then that form, if you check that box, adds in the SLB.
stuff.
Yeah. Scroll up, please. I think that was the main stuff I wanted to cover there. Up, please. We already went through the BCA. Multiple listing service again, brand new form. Talks about what is most of these things you've seen in the listing agreement, the old listing agreement. What is an MLS? What information is provided? What is broker's MLS? Scroll up, please. Benefits of using it. It has a spot in here to indicate which MLS you use. Talks about all the other stuff that was in the MLS before, just expanded a little bit. Go on up. Talk about seller concessions. And seller and brokerage side. Nothing too extraordinary there. Modification of the listing agreement form, you change the price, expiration date, compensation is referenced there. Anything you might need. Got a little other section for additional things. Scroll up, please. Oh, this is for if you already have an existing listing agreement. Open house forms. So let's get to the OHNA-SI. Scroll up, please, right here. So this form here, you fill out the property, put the agent's name, brokerage. It tells them in no uncertain terms that the agent does not represent the visitor.
Love it.
It tells them that any communications they have with you, it is only, they're only sharing information, they're not representing you. They are not confidential because you represent the seller. And if the buyer wants to write an offer through you, the agent that's at the open house, they're doing it, buyer will disclose agent or agent's broker represent the seller exclusively, or both the seller and the visitor, dual agency or single agency. And if you want the agent holding the open house to write an offer, then they're going to want to do a BRBC. Okay, scroll up, please. Back up, back down, please.
I'm good, it's only one page.
One page, and you got a bunch of places for visitors to find. Okay. Second page. This is a property showing and representation agreement. Form is a PR. What did I say it was?
You guys are all right.
Yeah, that. Thank you. It's used for showing up to 3 open houses, or other properties. Doesn't have to be an open house. And this serves as a standalone buyer representation agreement. So if you get a call, somebody, hey, want to go check out this, this open house, or I want to check out this property, it's just this one, I'm not gonna, do anything long-term with you or whatever, you can use this one too.
And that's gonna be at any open house that you're doing.
You can, well, this would be more for, if you're taking buyers around and you happen to pop into an open house, this is what you would want to have. If you don't yet have a buyer broker agreement, because remember, you have, before you actually take somebody into a house, you have to have a buyer representation agreement.
There's no new restrictions on it. If you have a buyer representation agreement and your buyer's out going to open houses without you, is there any change to that whole process?
No, what they're gonna do is.
They're gonna sign that to the other.
Yeah, they're gonna say, I'll already represented.
Let's hope they do.
All right.
Bruce, I have a few questions. I didn't have my phone, it was charging.
Okay.
So just real quick, if there's contracts that are currently in escrow, need to be modified with the new forms.
If it's currently in escrow on the buyer side. Well, no, you don't need to do a new purchase contract or anything like that. If it's currently in escrow, you don't need to update disclose, TDSs, SPQs, or anything like that. If it is not getting escrow, you would need to update the TDS and the SPQ on the listing side.
And the DM.
This is as of today?
Yeah.
Okay.
And at the DMLA.
And the DMLA, and the DMBR.
And the DMVR.
Yeah.
What's the DMVR? What's that?
That's the,
It's a DM what?
the two that has been available, DMLA and
Oh.
DMBR.
Okay, thank you. That's good, we're good.
All right,
So, okay, we'll have more of these.
yeah, I've gone way over my time.
Yes,
Thank you.
we appreciate it, but it wasn't, it's something we needed to do.
But just as a final word,
Yeah, I know, we'll get it on the calendar.
in addition to the other repeats of this type of thing that we'll do, please, this is your business. This is, you may be an agent with KW, but you are an independent contractor. You are running your own real estate business. Get the education that you need. Attend the classes that C.A.R. is going to offer. Attend the town hall. Educate yourselves, because this is going to become the basic knowledge that you know to be in practice. And if you don't know it and you make a mistake, oh boy, it's negligence. Okay, so anyway, thank you all.
Thank you, Bruce.
Thank you, Bruce.
I love the way you explained things, brother.
What was that?
I said, I love the way you explained things, but we need to hear it 5 more times.
Yeah, I know.
Did anybody not get?
Oh, I know.
Where are you coming from? Oh,
Okay.
Only for you.
Year.
Okay, my head's blowing off. How you doing? I'm good, honey. How are you?
No.